My name is Neniva Hart, and I turned 71 on a humid evening in Savannah. The air outside smelled of magnolia and salt from the river, but inside my dining room, the air was sweeter too sweet. The candles, the china, the perfect roast sable insisted on ordering in. It all felt staged, like a play we'd rehearsed too long. My daughter sat across from me, her posture flawless, her smile precise. She looked more like a guest than blood. I had spent my life restoring old paintings, learning how to hide cracks beneath layers of varnish. That night, I realized the same rule applied to families. You can repair the surface, but the damage never leaves. It only waits beneath the gloss. The table gleamed with glasses half filled with white wine. Kyle, my son-in-law, talked about the new development his company was building outside Charleston. I nodded when he expected me to, pretending interest. The grandchildren whispered and giggled under the tablecloth. And Sable, my only child, kept checking her phone between compliments about the house I still lived in. When the time came for cake, she lit a single candle. I remember how small the flame looked against the darkened room. Kyle urged everyone to sing. Their voices rose, too cheerful, echoing off the old plaster walls. I leaned toward the flicker, the air thick with sugar, and something unspoken. That's when I heard it. Not loud, not cruel, just soft enough to find its mark. Hope it's your last. Her voice slipped through the chorus like a needle through silk. I straightened, my heartbeat steady, my smile exact. For a moment, I felt nothing. Then something inside me cooled, as if the years of endurance had finally crystallized. I met her eyes. My wish is already granted, I said quietly. You'll see tomorrow. No one else noticed. The room erupted in applause as I blew out the candle. The smoke curled upward, pale and slow, carrying with it whatever warmth had survived between us. Later, as the laughter faded and the plates were cleared, that thin wisp of smoke lingered in my mind, an omen that refused to vanish. By nightfall, I had already decided what the next day would bring. When the last car pulled away, the house exhaled. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the faint notes of birthday chatter, all of it faded, leaving only the dull hum of the refrigerator and the smell of extinguished candles. I sat alone at the table, tracing the rim of my wine glass. The frosting on the cake had begun to melt, sliding down in uneven streaks like something exhausted from pretending. The candle stub still smoked. A thin ribbon of gray curled above the plate, reaching for air it would never find. I watched it dissolve and thought of how easy it is to mistake smoke for warmth. It hadn't always been like this. When Corin was alive, Sable and I could fight, cry, and laugh in the same afternoon. He had a way of softening her edges, of translating my silences into something she could still hear. After his stroke, the house changed, first quieter, colder, and then she did. At his funeral, she stood beside me, not touching my arm, eyes fixed on the flowers as though counting them. In the years that followed, she filled her life with things that made noise houses sold, parties attended, investments discussed over champagne. Kyle was her mirror, both polished, both hollow. I thought love might survive if I stayed useful. So I paid, advised, smiled. I told myself that obedience was patience, that patience was love. It was an old lie, and I had lived inside it far too long. I rose and crossed the room to my writing desk. The drawer stuck for a moment before yielding, as if reluctant to remember. Inside lay Corin's last letter, written in his unsteady hand the week before he died. The paper had yellowed, but the ink still held its quiet authority. Dignity isn't inherited, it's practiced. I read it twice, the words pressing against something deep in me, steady and unshakable. I folded the letter, slid it back, and closed the drawer. The silence of the house felt different now. It wasn't emptiness. It was space. And in that space, a thought took shape. Small, sharp, inevitable. I had spent a lifetime restoring what others damaged. Tomorrow, I would begin restoring myself. By morning, the scent of last night's candle still clung to the air. Savannah was already awake beyond my window. The sound of gulls near the river, the slow hum of traffic, the life of others moving forward. I dressed without hurry. Choosing the gray linen suit Corin once said made me look like someone who won't back down. The law office sat on Oglethorpe Avenue, tucked between a cafe and a gallery. I'd known Baron Calder for over 20 years. He handled Corin's estate when grief still blurred my signature. When he saw me, he stood, startled, then softened into a half-smile. "Neniva," he said, "it's been too long, not long enough." I replied gently. He poured coffee for us both black, no sugar, the same way Corin drank it. The familiarity steadied me. I laid a folder on his desk account statements, property deeds, an old will creased at the edges. "I want to make some changes," I said. For a while, we went through the details in silence. Baron's pen moved slowly, his handwriting careful and deliberate. The air smelled faintly of cedar from his shelves. I told him what I wanted a trust set aside for Ori and Lumen, untouched by their parents. The Hart house would remain under my name until I decided otherwise. And Sable, my only child, would no longer hold joint authority over my finances. Baron paused, eyes searching my face. "You're sure about this?" "I've never been surer," he nodded, adjusting his glasses. Though I saw the worry behind them. The printer hummed, papers slid out like measured breaths. I signed each one, feeling the quiet weight of what I was unbinding. "When we finished," he said softly, "you don't sound angry." "I'm not," I answered. "Justice should be quiet, like signing your name where love once lived." Outside, the light was sharp, clean. I stopped at a locksmith's on my way home, ordered new keys cut, new locks for every door. The man asked if I'd lost the old ones. "No," I said, watching the brass glint beneath his hands. "They just stopped fitting." By the time I returned to the house, the afternoon sun had shifted through the stained glass, scattering red and gold across the floor colors that looked almost like beginning again. Sunday arrived with the kind of sunlight Savannah is famous for. Golden? Forgiving? Deceptive? I opened every window of the house, letting the air move through the rooms as if preparing them to witness what would come. I told myself it was just a lunch, a simple family meal, nothing formal. That lie sat easily on my tongue. Juniper Pike, my neighbor of 20 years, came over carrying a basket of camellias. Her knees weren't what they used to be, but her hands still arranged flowers like small prayers. We worked side by side in silence until she finally said, "You're ready for what may not come back, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. The question deserved silence more than words. She looked at me for a long moment, nodded once, and went back to trimming the stems. By noon, the dining room had become a picture of composure. The linen was pressed, white as confession. The silverware caught the light like restrained emotion. I set a single candle in the center of the table, one flame, no more, and poured wine into the crystal glasses. The smell of rosemary and roasted lamb drifted from the kitchen, a domestic disguise for the truth underneath. I moved carefully, checking every place setting. Sable's seat faced the window. The afternoon light would fall directly across her plate. Beneath it, I slid the envelope, thick paper, my name embossed on the flap, the ink still fresh from my hand. It contained everything she needed to know, though not a word of it was cruel, just documents, clear and cold the trust, the separation of accounts, the end of her authority, each page a quiet line between us. When everything was ready, I stepped back to look. The table was beautiful, too beautiful for what it would hold. For a moment, I felt something close to grief, but softer, almost merciful. Juniper touched my arm before leaving. "You'll sit where you always sit." "Yes," I said. "It's still my table." After she left, I walked through the rooms one last time. The echoes of my footsteps steady and calm. Outside, a storm was gathering along the river, but the air inside my home stayed still, waiting. They arrived late, as I knew they would. Sable swept through the door first, her perfume preceding her like an announcement. Kale followed with his polished charm and perfect posture, balancing a bottle of wine he hadn't paid for. The children, Ori and Lumen, darted past their parents and wrapped their small arms around my waist, their laughter washing away, for a moment, the heaviness that waited behind them. We sat. The meal began smoothly enough. Kyle praised the house again, talking about liquidating heritage properties as if the walls couldn't hear him. Sable laughed a little too loudly, correcting him on wine pairings she didn't understand. The air was thick with pleasantries that meant nothing. I poured more wine, careful to keep my tone gentle. "It's good to see everyone together," I said. Kale smiled. "Family's everything, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, "and so are boundaries." That was the first crack. He blinked, confused but still grinning. Sable shifted in her chair, her bracelets clinking like warning bells. She began talking about her latest listing in oceanfront property, small but exclusive. Kyle interrupted to mention their expansion plans. How, with the right capital, they could... "Before dessert," I said softly, "there's something to read." The table went quiet. I reached beneath the linen and handed Sable the envelope. She hesitated, studying the seal as if it were an insult. Then she tore it open. The sound of paper splitting filled the room. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the next. The color drained from her face. Kale leaned over her shoulder, reading faster than she did, his jaw tightening. "What is this?" he demanded. "Documentation," I said, "clarifying ownership and intent. I won't keep funding my own disappearance." Sable's voice came out brittle. "You'll regret this." I folded my napkin, placed it neatly beside my plate. "I already did." I said, "That's why I stopped." Ori looked up from his spoon, sensing something wrong but too young to name it. Lumen whispered. Mom Sable didn't answer. Kale pushed his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. No one touched the cake. The candle remained unlit, the flame replaced by silence. I rose first, collected the plates, and carried them to the sink. Behind me, I heard the shuffle of chairs, the click of heels, the front door closing harder than necessary. When the echo finally faded, I stayed where I was, watching the empty chairs, feeling neither triumph nor sorrow, only an unmistakable calm, like a room just after a storm passes, and before the world remembers to breathe again. Morning sunlight spilled over the manicured lawns of Isle of Hope, bright and merciless. Sable turned the corner onto her street, the hum of her luxury SUV soft against the brick road. From a distance, she noticed the truck white, wide, and parked squarely in front of her house. Its hazard lights blinked like patient eyes. At first, she thought Kyle had arranged a delivery, but as she drew closer, the scene sharpened men in blue uniforms carrying out furniture, her furniture wrapped in canvas and shrink wrap. The dining table, the oil painting from Provence, even the mirror from her foyer, all of it moving steadily into the truck's open mouth. "What are you doing?" she demanded, stepping out of the car. Her heels clicked sharply against the driveway. One of the movers, a polite man with a clipboard, turned toward her. "Mrs. Hart." "Yes." He nodded calmly. We were instructed to transfer property belonging to Ms. Neniva Hart. Documentation's here. He held out a packet of papers. Her name wasn't on a single one. Each item listed had been purchased through Neniva's accounts, every chair, every frame, even the car she had just driven. "This is my home," Sable whispered, though the words came out thin, almost childish. "Ma'am," the mover said, lowering his eyes. "According to these records, the deed isn't." The neighbors were watching. Curtains stirred. Mrs. Pelham across the street stood frozen with her dog halfway through its walk. Sable felt the heat rise behind her eyes, her throat tightening around a sound she couldn't release. She pulled out her phone and dialed. The ring lasted too long before a recorded voice played. "This number no longer receives demands. Please direct inquiries to Mr. Baron Calder, attorney of record." Sable's hand trembled. She stared at the phone, then at the house that now seemed to reject her. The open door gaping, walls stripped of color. Kyle's car wasn't there. He had left early for a meeting, for once. She had no script, no audience. When the last crate slid into the truck, the mover closed the door with a final, heavy clang. The sound echoed through the cul-de-sac. Sable's knees gave way, and she sank onto the hot concrete, her reflection trembling in the glossy black of the empty window. Above her, the wind lifted a fallen receipt from the lawn, just paper. No name carried it away, light as the silence she had earned. The noise came first from lawyers, not from Sable. Cale's voice carried through every letter, cold, rehearsed, the sound of a man losing control but refusing to show it. They accused, demanded, threatened, property misappropriation, emotional duress, even elder coercion, as if I were some fragile widow tricked by my own mind. Baron Calder handled each word with precision. He spoke softly, almost kindly, as though addressing restless children. "All documents are verified, time-stamped, and notarized," he replied to their firm. "If your clients wish to pursue this publicly, we welcome the sunlight." The threats stopped within a week. I didn't answer any calls, didn't read the gossip columns that briefly mentioned the Savannah estate dispute. I simply watered my garden, returned the books I'd borrowed from the library, and walked by the river each evening. The air there had weight and salt and something like forgiveness. I watched barges drift toward the sea, silent giants moving as though time obeyed them. At home, the quiet felt different now, earned rather than imposed. The walls no longer listened for raised voices. I cooked small meals for myself, drank tea on the porch, and wrote short notes in the margins of old recipes. There was no triumph in it, only relief. A week later, Juniper left a letter tucked under my door. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender. "Dear Neniva," it began, "you're not cruel. You're finally free. The world calls that punishment because it doesn't know the cost of dignity." I read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. That night, I opened another drawer, the one I had kept locked since Corin's death. Inside were family photos, brittle from time, and 2 small envelopes labeled for Ori and Lumen. I took a fresh sheet of paper and wrote slowly, my handwriting steadier than I expected. Love built me. Boundaries kept me standing. I sealed the note and slipped it between their envelopes, then closed the drawer again. Outside, the river wind pressed gently against the windows, as if testing whether the house would hold. It did, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was the one holding it together. It was a warm Sunday morning when Juniper appeared at my gate, her sun hat tilting slightly against the breeze. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood Ori and Lumen, each holding a paper bag of cookies, their faces a mixture of excitement and shyness. They asked if they could visit their grandmother, Juniper said quietly. I thought you'd want to decide in person. The words caught somewhere between my chest and throat. For a heartbeat. I saw only sable in their eyes, the same gray-green shade that once flashed across my dining room table in anger. But the children's gaze was open, unspoiled. I nodded. Of course. Come in. Inside? The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and river wind. Ori placed the cookies on the table, proud as a diplomat. Lumen pointed to a photograph on the wall. Is that you? Grandma. You look happy. I was, I said softly. And I still am. They talked about school and their cat named Clover. I listened, nodding, as Juniper sipped her tea in silence. For a while, the house sounded alive again, chairs scraping, laughter echoing faintly through rooms that had known too much stillness. When they left, Lumen hugged me tight, leaving the faint scent of crayons on my sleeve. Mom said, maybe one day we can all come back. She whispered. I didn't promise, didn't correct her. I only touched her hair and said, you'll always have a place that welcomes you. After they drove off, I stepped into the yard. The lemon tree I had planted months ago stood knee-high, thin but stubborn. Its leaves shimmered in the sunlight, tender green against the older garden's quiet fatigue. I knelt beside it, brushed a bit of soil around its roots, and felt the earth give way just enough to breathe. It occurred to me then that Sable's cruelty hadn't always been cruelty. Some of it had been fear. Fear of fading, of becoming me, of inheriting the silence she'd misunderstood as surrender. That night, I sat at my desk and began a new letter. Not of reconciliation, but of release. My dear Sable, I wrote, I've left the door unlocked, but the key stays with me. You may knock when your hands are empty. I folded the paper, sealed it, and set it beside the one for her children. The wind outside shifted again, soft, patient, almost forgiving. The light was turning gold when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps, hesitant, almost rehearsed. I wiped my hands on a linen towel and went to the door, expecting Juniper or perhaps the mail carrier, but it was Sable. She stood there in a pale dress that looked wrinkled from travel. Her hair pulled back without its usual precision. The sharpness in her face had faded. Months had carved gentler lines, though not kinder ones. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cicadas filled the silence for us. I didn't call first, she said, her voice quiet. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I still know how to open a door. I replied, not unkindly. Come in, inside. The air smelled of tea and lemon balm. I poured 2 cups and set them on the table. She sat across from me, hands clasped tight, the tremor in her fingers barely visible. I've lost a lot, she said after a while. Kyle left. The business folded. People talk. She looked at the window instead of me. I used to think you enjoyed watching it happen. I shook my head. No, Sable. I just stopped protecting what didn't protect me. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. I don't know how to fix it. Neither do I said. But maybe fixing isn't the point. The tea went cold between us. Yet the silence felt softer than any words could make it. She looked around the room as if trying to remember how it once felt to belong there. When her gaze reached the doorway, she paused. There, beside the frame, hung the brass hook Baron had given me the month everything changed. 2 keys dangled from it. One engraved mine, the other guessed. Sable stood, walked to it slowly, her fingertips grazing the metal. What's this home? I said simply, but only by consent. She turned, eyes glossy yet steady. I understand. We didn't embrace. We didn't need to. When she left, the door stayed open for a moment, letting in the scent of river wind and magnolia. Then it closed gently, without finality. I looked at the keys again, their quiet weight catching the last of the sun. For the first time in years, the house felt neither full nor empty, only right.